Welcome to District Command Central, your go-to source for the latest news and updates on the Washington Commanders. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a play. The Washington Commanders enter the 2025 NFL season with high expectations and a weighty burden, one that feels heavier precisely because of what happened last year. After shocking the football world and storming into the conference title game, this roster suddenly faces the cruel truth that every breakout team eventually collides with. The year after is always harder, the targets painted on the back are brighter, and the excuses that once shielded them from criticism have evaporated. No longer the scrappy underdog, the Commanders are a franchise carrying legitimate contender status, and with that comes a terrifying reality. Every flaw, no matter how small, is magnified under the spotlight. Every misstep becomes ammunition for skeptics waiting to say, "We told you so." And according to analyst Brad Gagnon of Bleacher Report, the team's most glaring crack isn't in the offense that dazzled fans last year, nor in the young quarterback who ascended to stardom, but in the defense, a unit that looks strong on paper, yet carries the kind of uncertainty that can unravel a season. The alarms are being sounded, and fans are asking, is this the nightmare scenario waiting to drag Washington's dreams back into mediocrity? The warning signs lie not in a lack of talent, but in the merciless numbers of last season, numbers that whisper a truth more dangerous than any opposing roster. Washington ranked among the NFL's worst against the run, consistently giving up chunks of yardage that extended drives and bled momentum. They also generated just 17 takeaways, a number that may look acceptable in isolation but is devastating when paired with the razor-thin margins by which the Commanders lived in 2024. Think about how many close games they eked out, how often Jaden Daniels had to orchestrate late heroics, and then ask, can they survive another year if their defense fails to create turnovers? Gagnon doesn't believe so, and he may be right. It's not enough for the defense to be serviceable. With expectations as high as they are, this defense must transform into a weapon, not a liability. Because if it doesn't, all the magic of last season might dissolve in the harsh light of regression. That said, the offseason was not idle, nor was it careless. General Manager Adam Peters made his mission clear. Washington's defense would not enter 2025 without reinforcements. More than half the starting lineup will feature new faces, a radical overhaul that screams both urgency and ambition. On paper, it looks like a masterstroke. A healthy Marshawn Lattimore brings veteran lockdown presence. Rookie Trey Amos injects fresh energy into the secondary, and future Hall of Famer Von Miller, though at the tail end of his career, still commands respect as a pass-rushing menace. Add to that the growth of young defenders like Quan Martin and Mike Sainristil, both poised to become takeaway specialists, and suddenly you see a blueprint for disruption. Peters didn't just patch holes. He sought to create a ripple effect across every level of the defense. But blueprints are easy to admire in April. September through January is where reputations are made or shattered. Until these names produce, skepticism will linger, and that's where the nightmare risk hides. If there's one problem that haunted the Commanders more than any last season, it was their inability to stop the run. Opponents often dictated tempo, grinding down the defense, keeping Daniels on the sideline, and controlling momentum in a league where possession is power. Peters tried to change that too, bringing in Javon Kinlaw to plug the middle and Dietrich Wise Jr. to seal the edge. Both moves show intent, but again, nothing is guaranteed. Kinlaw has the size, but questions about consistency remain. Wise is sound, but at 30, how much can he still offer in a division where power running is a weekly ordeal? These aren't minor concerns. They are central to Washington's identity in 2025. If this defense bends against the run the way it did last year, no amount of secondary heroics or late-game Daniels magic will be enough to carry them through another gauntlet of playoff-caliber teams. And that, in the cold calculus of football, is exactly what makes the situation so precarious. Yet defense isn't the only shadow looming over this roster. Special teams, often overlooked until disaster strikes, could become a subplot of dread. Veteran kicker Matt Gay was supposed to bring reliability, the calm presence who makes 3 points feel automatic. But his preseason struggles rattled confidence. Preseason doesn't always matter, but for a team expected to play tight games again, Every miss carries the weight of a potential playoff spot. The Commanders cannot afford a season where fans hold their breath every time the field goal unit trots out. Gay needs to be solid, because if he's not, the ripple effect will be brutal. Coaches second-guess fourth-down decisions, players lose faith, and opponents sense weakness. Sometimes, the nightmare doesn't arrive in the form of a blown coverage or a missed tackle. It comes in the haunting echo of a football clanking off the upright when everything is on the line. On the offensive side, the danger is different but equally real. Washington's offensive line is undergoing a quiet reshuffle, with players shifting into new roles and chemistry still forming. Protection was a hidden strength last season, the foundation that allowed Daniels to improvise and receivers to shine. Any regression there could derail the entire operation. A young quarterback, no matter how brilliant, cannot thrive if he is constantly running for his life or taking hits that wear him down by December. This is why analysts argue that a small step back on offense is far more dangerous than defensive lapses. The Commander's identity is tied to explosive plays and Daniels' uncanny ability to create. If the offensive line falters, everything else becomes fragile. Fans can handle a defense that bends. They cannot stomach an offense that breaks. But perhaps the most sinister threat of all doesn't come from personnel, schemes, or statistics. It comes from psychology. Overconfidence is a subtle killer, and after a season where Washington exceeded every expectation, the temptation to believe their own hype is real. Daniels was electric, yes, but too often he had to save the team with late-game heroics. Too often, the wins came by razor-thin margins. Winning close games builds character, but it also creates an illusion of invincibility. That illusion is dangerous. If players walk into 2025 assuming Daniels will bail them out again, if they believe last year's magic will simply repeat itself, then complacency will spread like poison. Great teams aren't built on hope. They're built on execution across all phases. The Commanders cannot afford to forget that, not in a league where opponents are sharpening knives with every passing week. Week 1 against the New York Giants offers a chance to test all of this. Ironically, Gagnon points out that the Giants' offensive line is their Achilles heel, a weakness so glaring it borders on parody. Washington's revamped defense could feast early, especially if Andrew Thomas remains hobbled. Imagine the psychological boost of beginning the season by exploiting another team's biggest flaw, turning their problem into Washington's solution. But football rarely follows the script. If the Commanders struggle to capitalize, if the Giants manage to protect their quarterback and expose Washington's lingering defensive issues, the nightmare scenario Gagnon warns about could begin unraveling faster than anyone anticipated. The season is long, but tone is set early. The Commanders must decide whether they will carry last year's momentum into destiny or collapse under the weight of expectations, proving that 2024 was not the dawn of a dynasty, but a fleeting dream. If you're enjoying the coverage, make sure to smash that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on the Commanders' latest moves. We want to hear from you. It's the kind of headline that almost makes you rub your eyes twice and check if you're not living in some alternate football universe. But yes, the rumor mill has turned into hard fact. CeeDee Lamb, the explosive wide receiver who defined so many highlight reels for the Dallas Cowboys, is officially a Washington Commander. The NFL thrives on storylines, rivalries, and drama, but this one feels like a blockbuster twist straight out of a Hollywood script. For years, Lamb was the beating heart of Dallas' passing game, the guy who could turn a slant into a touchdown or a contested catch into a roar from the home crowd. He was marketed as the face of the franchise, the bridge between the Cowboys' flashy tradition and their future hopes. To imagine him now in burgundy and gold instead of silver and blue doesn't just shake up the NFC East, it flips the board entirely, because Washington didn't just add a player, they added Dallas' biggest offensive weapon. The Commanders didn't just steal a star, they stole a piece of identity, a symbol that will sting every Cowboys fan every single time Lamb lines up against them, especially in primetime games. The emotional shock of this signing runs deeper than football mechanics. Cowboys fans, who chanted his name and bought his jerseys by the truckload, will feel betrayed, even if Lamb himself simply saw this as business. That's the part about sports that's both cruel and fascinating. Loyalty is a luxury, and contracts speak louder than sentiment. Reports had been swirling for months about dissatisfaction in Dallas, whispers about Lamb wanting more respect in negotiations, about him feeling underappreciated despite carrying the passing attack on his back. Those whispers now have context, because Washington not only offered him a hefty financial package, but also gave him something Dallas seemingly failed to: the sense that he is the guy, not just a star among stars. The rivalry backdrop makes this decision sting twice as much, because it's one thing to lose your star receiver to an AFC team. It's another to watch him line up for your bitter divisional enemy. The Commanders didn't just sign Lamb. They fired a psychological missile straight into the Cowboys' locker room, leaving both fans and teammates scrambling to process the fallout. For the Commanders, this isn't just about a splashy signing. It's a strategic move that sends a message to the entire league. Washington is no longer interested in being a background storyline. They want the spotlight. They want to shake the narrative of mediocrity that has haunted them for decades. Bringing in CeeDee Lamb is about creating a new identity, one that screams explosiveness, swagger, and ambition. This is a franchise that's been searching for stability, for a true offensive cornerstone that fans can rally around, and Lamb provides exactly that. His route running, his yards after catch magic, and his ability to dictate coverage will instantly elevate the Commanders' offense. Defenses that once focused on shutting down Washington's run game or blitzing inexperienced quarterbacks will now have to reckon with the constant threat of Lamb blowing the top off. Beyond the X's and O's, it's also about marketing power. Suddenly the Commanders have a jersey that kids want to wear, a face to put on billboards, a personality who can energize a fan base desperate for a hero. Lamb doesn't just bring touchdowns, he brings credibility. And credibility has been rare currency in Washington for far too long. The Cowboys, meanwhile, are left with more questions than answers. How did it come to this? How do you let your best receiver, the centerpiece of your offense, slip not only out of your hands but straight into the arms of your most hated rival? Jerry Jones has always prided himself on being a master negotiator, the kind of owner who knows how to keep stars in-house. But this time the front office looks outmaneuvered and flat-footed. They'll say it was about the cap, about long-term planning, about not mortgaging the future for one player, but fans don't want logic, they want stars. And Lamb was a star in every sense of the word. Dallas has always been about spectacle, about having that one guy who makes you believe, who sells the myth of America's team, and now that myth feels cracked. Sure, they still have weapons, still have talent, but losing Lamb in this way is not just subtraction, it's humiliation. Every drop, every miscommunication, every stalled drive next season will come with a ghost. The thought of what might have been if number 88 had still been catching passes in Arlington. There's also the personal side of CeeDee Lamb's story that makes this move all the more fascinating. Lamb grew up under the spotlight of being the next in a long line of iconic Cowboys receivers who wore the 88, from Drew Pearson to Michael Irvin to Dez Bryant. That number carries weight. It's practically sacred in Dallas, and Lamb was supposed to be the next legend in that lineage. Walking away from that legacy to join a rival doesn't just make a statement, it breaks tradition. And maybe that's exactly why he did it. Maybe Lamb was tired of living in the shadow of the past, tired of being compared to ghosts, tired of being defined by cowboy mythology instead of carving his own identity. In Washington, there are no sacred numbers, no overwhelming tradition pressing down on him. He can be the first, the original, the benchmark. And for a player who thrives on confidence, swagger, and individuality, that blank canvas might have been just as appealing as the massive paycheck. For Lamb, this might not just be about football or rivalry. It could be about freedom, about writing his own story without someone else's script hanging over his shoulder. From a purely football standpoint, the ripple effects across the NFC East are massive. Defenses that once stopped Lamb on their Cowboys game plan will now be facing him in a completely different scheme, with different matchups, and that alone forces coordinators to rethink their strategies. Imagine Philadelphia's secondary, already stressed with containing multiple threats, now having to see Lamb twice a year in a new uniform. Imagine the Giants, still building their defensive identity, watching Lamb torch them while he celebrates in Burgundy. And for Dallas, the absence is just as impactful. Without Lamb's ability to draw double coverage, suddenly other receivers won't see the same space, the same opportunities. The trickle-down effect could alter the entire offensive structure. It's not just about one player leaving. It's about the gravitational pull he carried with him, and how everything shifts when that pull is gone. Washington, on the other hand, suddenly has that gravity, and it gives them leverage in every play, in every drive. The chessboard has changed, and every move in the division will now feel different because of this seismic signing. Fans are already reacting in predictable but intense ways. Cowboys Twitter is in meltdown mode, flooded with broken heart emojis, jersey burnings, and accusations aimed at Jerry Jones and the front office. Some are calling it the worst betrayal since Deion Sanders switched sides decades ago. Others are simply stunned into silence. On the other side, Commanders fans are celebrating like it's Christmas morning, flooding social media with photoshopped images of lamb and burgundy, chanting about a new era, and boasting that the balance of power in the NFC East has finally shifted. Rivalries live and breathe through these moments, and this one will pour gasoline on the fire for years to come. Every matchup between Dallas and Washington is now must-watch television, not just because of the scoreboard implications, but because of the personal drama baked into every snap. The stadium atmosphere will be electric, the boos deafening, the cheers euphoric. And through it all, Lamb will stand at the center, either as the villain in Dallas or the hero in Washington, depending on which colors you bleed. Thanks for tuning into District Command Central. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for all the Commanders news you need. Until next time, keep the faith and hail to the Commanders.